أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الغر الميامين ولعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: من كنت مولاه فعلي مولاه، اللهم وال من والاه وعاد من عاداه. Amma ba'd. So today we are into our 13th lecture, and we are just about to finish the Imamat series that we have started regarding the Imamat of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. And we have gone through some of the proofs that we have used for the Imamat of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and finally in the last class, in the last lecture, or should I say, we discussed about the Hadith al-Ghadir. Last two sessions we were discussing about it, but last class was more crucial, and last lecture we discussed that what Mawla actually meant and how did the event of Ghadir took place and what took place in it. So we had to go really quickly, and we have to brush through a lot of points, but hopefully inshallah if you go through it again we will be able to learn more things. Today we will be talking about the topic of what? About the topic of Hadithul Manzila. Remember this word Hadithul Manzila. It's not a problem if you remember some Arabic terminology, because it is actually helpful when you are doing further research and when you are trying to make other people know what you are trying to understand or what you're trying to communicate. So Hadith al-Manzila is what? Hadith al-Manzila simply is that when Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam was being said as what? As the Harun of this ummah, right? What happened was the Prophet said to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam that, "O Ali, are you not happy that your position to me is as that of the position of Harun to Musa? But there wouldn't be any prophet coming after me." So how can we prove that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam is the Imam and the Khalifa after Prophet? Inshallah, we will be going into more details. But one thing is sure, that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam has all those status that Prophet Harun alayhi salatu wassalam had with respect to Prophet Musa. So Amir al-Mu'mineen has the same status in the eyes of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there's only one exception which is made. What is that exception? That exception is made up of the prophethood. That as far as the prophethood is concerned, O Ali, that prophethood, you won't get the prophethood. Why? Because there is no Nabi after me. أَنَّهُ لَا نَبِيَّ بَعْدِي. There is no Nabi after me. Right? So since I am the one who is Khatimun Nabiyyin, or Khataman Nabiyyin, both ways are fine. So I am the one, I'm the seal of the Prophet. There is no Prophet after me. And this is a fundamental Shia Aqidah. Right? We clearly disassociate ourselves with the people that believe that there are prophets that can come after Prophet Muhammad. Right? So this was the hadith that was said regarding Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. And this hadith is so powerful. It is mentioned in really important Sunni books. Inshallah, we will be going in more details. If you go through which books mention about it, so let me just go to you some of the books that are in which this hadith is mentioned. Firstly, Sahih al-Bukhari. In Sahih al-Bukhari, this hadith is mentioned about Amir al-Mu'mineen. Likewise in Sahih Muslim. Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim are what? Are two of the most authentic Sunni texts. Sunnis would be quoting you the books, and Sunni would be quoting you the hadith, and if the hadith is quoted from Bukhari and Muslim, generally Sunnis would accept it and they would never doubt the authenticity. Likewise, this hadith is also quoted in Sunan Tirmidhi and Sunan Ibn Majah. Why I only quoted these four books? Because out of these four books, Sihah Sitta contains 6 books. Sihah Sitta is the most authentic Sunni literature. 6 primary Sunni books, right, that they generally rely upon. What are those? Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Sunan al-Tirmidhi, Sunan ibn Majah, Sunan Abi Dawood, and Sunan al-Nisa'i. So out of these 6 books, I have given you how many names? 4 names. Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah. So the scholars have quoted this hadith in this book. So this can tell you how important this hadith is, that it has come in the initial books of Ahl Sunnah. However, as I have said, and I'm repeating it again, the Sunnis have the habit of doing what? The Sunni scholarship, not all of them, I would say, but a lot of them. When Shias are bringing the proof, they always have the habit of discrediting it. Always saying this hadith is da'if, this hadith is weak, this hadith is mawdu', fabricated, this hadith is munkar, it shouldn't be relied upon, and all these excuses will be popped up as soon as the Shia will be bringing a hadith, right? Likewise with this hadith too. In Sawa'iq al-Muharriqa by Ibn Hajar. Now, Ibn Hajar has this book, Sawa'iq al-Muharriqa, and this book is so important that it is actually one of the classical sources that we have that has been written against whom? Against the Shias. So he says that وَجَوَابُهَا, so he is quoting this hadith and he's saying this, أن الحديث إن كان غير الصحيح كما يقوله الآمدي. So he's quoting one of the Sunni scholar, and he's saying that Amidi, who is a Sunni Usuli, who has written on the topic of Ilm al-Usul, and a really well-respected personality. Ibn Hajar is saying that this hadith is weak, is not authentic, it's not sahih. When it comes to who? When it comes to Amidi. Amidi simply declares it inauthentic. وَإِنْ كَانَ صَحِيًّا كَمَا يَقُولُ أَئِمَّةُ الْحَدِيثِ وَالْمُعَوَّلِ, that even if the scholars, even if they have termed it hadith as sahih, as authentic, ليس إلا عليهم كيف وهو في الصحيح فهو من قبيل الأحاد. That's another point that Ibn Hajar said. And these are 2 fundamental points that you need to understand. What is he trying to say? Firstly, he tries to say this hadith is inauthentic as per the research of Amidi. Amidi is a Sunni Usuli and the Sunni scholar that we have already mentioned. And then he says, even though if the hadith is authentic, then this hadith is an isolated report. It's not mutawatir. Now we have talked about this concept of singular isolated reports and mutawatir in a lot of details in the lectures before. And we said that there are 2 kinds of reports generally when we have. One are the reports that have come to us through singular chains, that has come to us through non-multiple chains, maybe through 2 chains or 3 chains. They haven't gone through a huge number, that it becomes multiple. It has come to us through like few chains, right? Or even through 1 chain. Those kind of hadith are called what? Akhbarul ahad. Those are the isolated reports, singular reports, right? Compared to those akhbarul ahad, we have mutawatir riwayat, right? Again, I'm trying to explain you. Mutawatir, or the multiple reports, are those that have been quoted by so many people that we don't even have an iota of doubt in our mind, and we have no single doubt in our mind about the authenticity of the hadith. And we give an example of Hadith al-Ghadir. Hadith al-Ghadir has been quoted by so many scholars and so many companions that we don't have any doubt about the authenticity of the hadith. Likewise, this hadith was said ahad. So the problem with ahad is generally if the reports are isolated, sometimes they cannot be constituted, we cannot use them in matter of aqidah, right? In aqidah, generally we would use what? Akhbar al-mutawatir, right? Those are the hadith that we would use. Those are hadiths that have come to us through multiple chains, or even though if they are singular, they combine with other chains and they become strong in a way that we can use them in our aqidah. So Ibn Hajar said, even if we deem that this hadith is quoted to us through an authentic quotation, right? Even then, this hadith is coming to us through isolated reports. And that's why this hadith is not to be relied upon, right? This is what Ibn Hajar has said. Now, what should be our answer to it? Our answer to this is that if you take the book which are written on the topic of tawatur, right? Those books that have been written in the topics of what? Tawatur. There's an important book called Nazmul Mutanathir. And this book is written by Qattani. And this book is on the topic of tawatur, as we have said. So he says that this hadith of manzila, and he says it in the hadith number 233. So he mentions all those mutawatir traditions that as per his research are mutawatir. Then under the hadith number 233, he mentioned this hadith. And he says that this hadith is quoted to us through multiple companions. Multiple companions of Prophet have quoted this hadith. Who are they? He says Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, Asma bint Umais, Salama, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Habshi bin Junada, Abdullah ibn Umar, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam, Jabir bin Sumrah, Bara ibn Adib, Zayd ibn Arqam. So he quotes 10 people here, right? And then he goes further. This hadith is also quoted from Malik ibn Huwayrith, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, Umar ibn al-Khattab, right? And then he said that one of their scholars, his name is Ibn Asakir. Ibn Asakir has combined the chains of this hadith, and he came to this conclusion that this hadith is quoted by more than 20 companions. More than 20 companions have quoted this hadith, Hadithul Manzila. So we can clearly say, and we can say with comfort, that there is no doubt about the authenticity of it. Likewise in Kifayatul Talib. Kifayatul Talib is a book by Allama Ganji al-Shafi'i. He says this hadith is quoted by Bukhari in his Sahih, Muslim in his Sahih, Abu Dawood fi Sunan, probably the manuscript that he had, it might contain from Sunan Abi Dawud too. Abu Isa Tirmidhi in his book Sunan in Jami', Nisai in his Sunan, Ibn Majah in his Sunan. So all those 6 scholars, as per his research, have quoted this. And then he says that Hakim Nishapuri has said this hadith is tawatur, mutawatir. This hadith is through multiple chains and multiple routes. So those hadiths that have come to us through multiple routes, there is no doubt about the authenticity. Likewise in present time, another scholar we have, and his name is really huge and monumental. His name is what? Allama Nasruddin al-Albani. Allama Nasruddin al-Albani is really well respected among the Sunni circles, especially the Salafis among them. He has a book, and in that book, he says that this hadith is quoted to us through multiple chains. So what he says is that this hadith is sahih li ghayrihi, it's authentic. And then he says it's not even authentic, bal huwa mutawatir. This hadith is not only authentic, it is mutawatir. It has come to us through multiple routes and multiple chains. So there is no doubt. So in this way, till now, what we have discussed is the doubt that Ibn Hajar al-Makki, he brought forward. And he said that, see, this hadith is only quoted by few scholars. And obviously that's not what he said, but he said this hadith is sahih and it's akhbarul ahad and it cannot be trusted. So then we came up with this answer. No, this is the way he's saying is not right, because this hadith has been quoted to us through multiple companions, and then we named them. Now what happened is that, what is the status of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam in the eyes of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? So Prophet Muhammad has made him equal to who? Prophet Harun. So Prophet Harun and Prophet Musa. So Prophet Harun here, Prophet Musa here. Likewise, Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Whatever relationship that Harun alayhi salatu wassalam had with Musa alayhi salatu wassalam, all that relationship is present between Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, with only one exception. And what is that exception? That exception is of the prophethood. That Amir al-Mu'minin is not a prophet, except of him being a prophet, all the status and all the ranks the Prophet Harun alayhi salatu wasalam had, same ranks and same things Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wasalam possessed you. Do you get my point? Harun, Musa alayhi salam. Amir al-Mu'minin, Rasulullah alayhi salam. So same status. And what is the status of Prophet Harun alayhi salatu wasalam? So we go through Surah Al-Taha, and let's start with the dua that Prophet Musa asked. So Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wasalam was asked to go to Pharaoh, was asked to go to Pharaoh and preach the message of Islam. So Prophet Musa said, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qala Rabbi shrah li sadri, that, oh my Lord, open my breast for me, right? Wa yassir li amri, and ease my task for me, make my task easy, right? Wahlul uqdatan min lisani, and loosen the knot from my tongue. I'm just going with the famous translations, right? Do I agree with the translation? Maybe not. That's another topic for another day, right? And then it goes, yafqahu qawli, so that they may understand my speech, my message. Waj'al li, now concentrate here, this is really important. Waj'al li waziran min ahli, and appoint for me from my household someone who will bear my burden, right? Harun akhi. So who is what? Prophet Harun is someone who is distributing the burden that Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wasalam has to go through. And then he mentioned who? Harun akhi. It is Prophet Harun alayhi salatu wasalam who is my brother, right? Harun akhi, and then it goes that strengthen me through him. So first what did he say? To make Harun as his wazir, as someone from his household that will ease the burden. And then second is what? Harun is his brother. And third is what? That strengthen me through Harun alayhi salatu wasalam. Wa ashrikhu fi amri, and let him share my task. That's the fourth thing, right? And then it says, كَيْ نُسَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا وَنَذْكُرُكَ كَثِيرًا إِنَّكَ كُنْتَ بِنَا بَصِيرًا. Then it goes in further, right? So these are the four positions that are mentioned about Harun alayhi salatu wasalam. Harun was the brother of Amir al-Mu'mineen, right? Harun was what? The wazir. Someone who was the wazir. Wazir is what? When you are not there, who would take care of your affairs? Your wazir, right? That person is called wazir. And Harun is called as a brother. And Harun is said to be someone who would be sharing the burden. And Harun would be someone that will be helping Prophet Musa in his task. So four things that are mentioned here. All these four things are present for Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam. When Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam is what? Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam is the Khalifa, right? Is the Khalifa how? The verse goes as that, وَقَالَ مُوسَى لَأَخِيهِ هَارُونَ. I'm just paraphrasing it, of course, right? That make me as a caliph, right? Appoint Harun alayhi salatu wassalam as the caliph of Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wassalam. And Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam, since Harun alayhi salatu wassalam was what? Was the caliph of Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wassalam. Likewise, we can say that Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam is the brother of Prophet Muhammad. Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam is someone that will help Prophet in easing his burden. Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam, as Quran has mentioned, is the Khalifa of Prophet. The way Harun alayhi salatu wassalam was the Khalifa, was the successor of Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wassalam. And when Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wassalam went to Mount Sinai, went to the mountain to get the Torah, who did he leave behind him? He left Prophet Harun alayhi salatu wassalam behind him. And Prophet Harun alayhi salatu wassalam, in those days when Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wassalam was not present within the people, Harun alayhi salatu wassalam was the Khalifa. Harun alayhi salatu wassalam was managing the affairs of the people. So this is the way Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam is. When Prophet would leave this world, it will be Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam that will be leading the community. Now, someone might say, oh, this is something which is really specific to the event of Tabuk that took place. Because see, in the Battle of Tabuk, what happened was that when Prophet was going for the war, he left Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam as in charge of Medina. He said, oh, Ali, you take care of the states of the Medina, right? Then the people started saying some stuff. People were saying, see, Prophet doesn't want to take Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam because Prophet doesn't love Amir al-Mu'minin, na'udhu billah. Our Prophet has some sort of hatred within him for Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wasalam. So there was a huge propaganda that people that had the animosity of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Ali Muhammad alayhi wasallam, they started making propaganda against the family of the Prophet. And at that moment, Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, he came to meet Prophet where? Not in Medina. He came to meet Prophet in a place called Jarf. It's called Jurf, right? At that place, Prophet and Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wasalam met. And Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wasalam revealed what the people, what the hypocrites behind in Medina are saying about Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wasalam. And in that moment, Prophet said whatever he said about him being like the example of Harun, and Prophet being the example of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. So some Sunnis says, they say that, okay, even if we accept it, then this hadith is specifically only when Prophet was going for a traveling. And since when he came back, so Amir al-Mu'minin was the Khalifa for that specific period and he wasn't, it doesn't mean that Amir al-Mu'minin has to be Khalifa after the demise of the Prophet from this world. Our answer to this is that if this was the thing that you want to imply, then why did Prophet said that there is no Prophet after me? Like Prophet could have just said, your example to me is that of Harun to Musa. When Musa alayhi salatu wasalam went for the 40 days, he left Harun alayhi salatu wasalam. And I'm going for these number of days and I'm leaving you behind, my people, so you can take care of their affairs. If this hadith was specifically for that event, then why did Prophet says, Annahu la nabiyya ba'di? There is no prophet, there is no Nabi after me. Which clearly means that Prophet was not even implying the message for that day only or for that specific event only. Prophet was implying this message even after his demise, even after he's gone from this world. Why? Because the word Annahu la nabiyya ba'di implies this. There is no prophet after me, which means that whatever position that Harun alayhi salatu wasalam had, or Ali, you had the same position as of the Harun, and you are the one that will be taking care of the affairs of the Muslims after me. But just that you will be only a successor, you would be only a Khalifa, you would not be a Nabi. Why? Because the Nabuwah has ended over me. That's our first answer. And second answer is that who has said that this thing was only said in the event of Tabuk, Ghazwatul Tabuk? This thing has been said so many times. This was even said that when Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam and Prophet, they had the brotherhood. So see, Prophet and Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wassalam had two kinds of brotherhood. One brotherhood happened when they were in Mecca. The other brotherhood happened when they migrated from Mecca to Medina. At that moment too, when this brotherhood was taking place, Prophet said to Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salatu wasalam the same thing, that you are to me as if Harun was to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. So this clearly destroys this whole argument. Why does it destroy the whole argument? Because why? Why? Again, because they are trying to implement it and make it really specific to that event. We are saying that this hadith is not even specific to that event. Why? Because the wordings that Prophet has said applies to his applies after him too. Why? Because he has said la nabiyya ba'di. Likewise, Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam not only used these words when he was going for the battle, but he also said it when he was having the brotherhood pact between the people. Likewise, when Zayd ibn Haritha and Amir al-Mu'mineen and Ja'far, they were discussing about who should have the authority over the daughter of Hamza alayhi salatu wassalam. At that moment too, this hadith was being said. Likewise, this hadith is being quoted by whom? By Asma bint Umays. Now, please try to understand what I'm trying to say. This hadith, as we have mentioned it before too, this hadith is quoted by whom? By Asma bint Umays. And in Asma bint Umays, she was a lady that used to love Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. So she said that she has heard Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying that Ali's position to me is the position of Harun to Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. And this hadith is quoted by whom? Fadail al-Sahaba, Ahmad bin Hanbal. And the researcher of this hadith has said what? This hadith is authentic. The sanad of this hadith is authentic. Now we have already established that this hadith was said where? This hadith was said not in Medina. This hadith was said in the outskirts of Medina. And the name of the place was what? Jurf or Jurf, right? Just trying to make it a little bit easier because obviously the names we might have difference in pronunciation, but you have to remember this wasn't said in Medina. This was said outside the Medina when it comes to the event of Tabuk. So Asma, she heard it from whom? Prophet, straight. She didn't hear it from a secondary source. She heard it from her own ears. What was Prophet saying, right? And Prophet, after the Fath al-Makkah, after the conquest of Makkah, would never take any woman with him in the battlefields. Now try to understand this point, please. Try to understand this point. Prophet would never take any woman into the battlefield after the conquest of Makkah, as per the research of Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. That's one argument. Asma radiallahu ta'ala anha, she heard Prophet saying this statement. Two things. So this clearly means that she didn't hear Prophet saying this statement when Prophet was leaving for the battle of Tabuk. Why? Because we have already established that this statement was not said in Medina. This statement was said in the outskirts of Medina, few miles outside the Medina when Prophet was going. And Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam complained him what the hypocrites were saying behind him. So at that moment, Prophet made this clarification and told whatever he said. And Asma was where? She was in Medina. So it is impossible for her to go and hear what Prophet was saying from her own ears in the outskirts of Medina. Why? Because Prophet would never take a woman in the battlefield after the conquest of Makkah. So what is the conclusion we have? The conclusion we have from this hadith is that the Asma bint Umays, she heard Prophet not in the event of Tabuk, perhaps any other event that we don't know, but at least we are sure not in the event of Tabuk. Why? Because the event of Tabuk, the hadith was said not in Medina. It was said outside the Medina. So probably she heard it any other time. And this destroys the argument of the people that says that this hadith is only specific to the event of Tabuk. You get my point? Because they want to specify it with the event of Tabuk, which means that Prophet was just leaving Ali alayhi salatu wassalam just for a few days. And since he was taking care of the affairs of the Muslims in Medina, so that's why it is being said that he was like the example of Harun to Musa. But it doesn't apply that it applies to him after his lifetime. After the lifetime of the Prophet, this hadith doesn't apply to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam. So we give the answer, if this is the true thing, then why would Prophet say, La nabiyya ba'di? There is no prophethood after me. It clearly says that Prophet wants to imply it even after his demise. Our second answer to it is that the Asma bint Umays, she heard it from the Prophet. And it is impossible for her to hear it in the event of Tabuk because the hadith was said in the outskirts of Medina, and Prophet would never take any lady in the battlefield after the conquest of Makkah. Anyone, any lady, she wouldn't go. So whenever she heard it in any other event but the event of Tabuk, which proves our point. This Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wassalam was the Harun of this ummah, and that Harun of this ummah was not specific to the event of Tabuk. It actually continued from the lifetime, even in the lifetime of the Prophet, and it actually goes all the way after his demise too. So with this example and with this understanding, we can say as Harun alayhi salatu wasalam was the Khalifa of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, as been mentioned in the Quran, and was the Wazir of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, and was the brother of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. Likewise, Ameer al-Momnin alayhi salatu wasalam was the brother, was the Wazir, and was the Khalifa of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin.